I'm like, this has been overproduced. This guy should not have these clean white teeth. Where it's like they wanted to make it so clean that even this barbarian, who would probably never, I'm almost assuredly would never brushed his teeth, had these perfectly white teeth. And it was just almost like a model shot of it.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't happen, man.
Yeah. So what do you think of the Kendricks brothers movies and the whole thing they've done coming out of their church?
You're talking about are they the ones that did Courageous and Fireproof and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Again, I see. What is our goal with those movies? Is our goal to bring in non-believers to convert them, or because if that's it, we're gonna fail that goal.
But it does work. I use it as a tool in my church, and I get men who say, "Oh, this isn't a sissy thing. I want to join Christ." So it is a great tool in a small group setting. It just doesn't sell in a big house.
In a big house. And I think, and that was going to be the conclusion of my talk was we are so bent on moving people towards come to my church to hear about Christ, and we're not pushing our individuals to share Christ. You know what I mean? Or come see this movie with me and you'll hear about Christ. Come to my church and hear about Christ. Listen to this song and hear about Christ. Instead of me telling you about Christ, about my conversion experience. I don't know why we've taken that responsibility off ourselves. It's just easier, I guess. And we got programs out there like Evangelism Explosion, and there's tons of programs out there, but we shy away from it. Why do we shy away from it?
Because it's a lot easier to hand them a DVD than to open your soul.
Yeah. May I add a point to that? It's just something that I've learned in Thailand is when we work with foreigners, it's not one of the things I've learned from a lot of guys. I agree with you. Instead of let the DVD do it, let the Passion of the Christ do it. Let me tell you. But I'd also like to maybe encourage us to look one step beyond that and not only let me tell you, but let me live it to you as well. Because what does it matter if I tell you about Christianity, but I don't live Christianity? Right. What happens if I tell you you should be faithful, but I choose to not be faithful? What does it matter if I tell you that we should love one another, but I spend my whole Facebook post complaining and saying that this person is the Antichrist or the devil or whatever? And so that's just something that I've experienced in my own ministry as well.
Sure.
The pigtail on that one too is the fact is that people see my walk. I'm out in the industry. I work for the University of Wisconsin. People see me. They know I'm a Christian. They don't understand me. Then they see that and they say, "I get it. I get what happened to you." Mm-hmm. So basically, it's my lifestyle. Then they see something else, and then it helps them make that step to say, "Yes, this is for me also, not just for you."
And who here has not tried to form a relationship with somebody just to convert them? And it shows. It really does. Nothing turns people off. I mean, probably the most. Then you're there and you're not being genuine because you just want this goal. It is about relationships. Every one of them.
It really shows in jail ministry. If you go in as a chaplain and work with guys in jail, they're all con artists pretty much. And the same is true in the whole addiction field. Is that if our goal is just to convert them, they know that instant because they're con artists and they pick you as a con right away, Christians. Right. But they really pick it if they understand that you're there only because you love them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
care about them.
Say I was in I worked in a homeless shelter for a couple of years as well, and same thing. Definitely, guys straight up the street. Not that they weren't trying to find different ways to get away with stuff, but they once they know how much you got paid, they knew you weren't, that you weren't after anything from them because, but it's just that authenticity, and that maybe that's a problem. One of the problems with the movies, and I didn't want to come off as bashing all Christian movies or anything like that because they have honest goals. They do. Is there ways that we can do things better?
Well, I was going to do my.
Go for it.
I was going to change what I was supposed to do something on Power Story, but there's been something the Lord's put on my heart for a while, and I think it kind of really touches a lot of what we're talking about Christian literature, different biblical archetypes, why Christians aren't making good movies, and even touch the bigger question, I just want to really pick all of your brains, if I could, is I've been thinking so much about what is the mission of the church. And sometimes I think the way we're writing the literature, especially Christian literature, is going to always reflect what we believe the mission of the church is. And the last, I'd say 50 years, it's been pretty much dominated by evangelicals. And I mean, I love evangelicals, you know, and obviously we're all called to be evangelists. But for that to be the mission of the church is really being reflected in our literature today. For example, I had a friend, he was going to write stories, and thankfully he never did because they were terrible ideas. But I love him. I mean, I love this guy. But he had 10 story ideas he pitched to me and was telling me about, and it was all the same plot. It was basically you got a drug addict or a murderer or a thief or just fill in the blank, awful person or awful woman, and he gets saved at the end. That was his plot. Every single one ended where he gets saved at the end. And I think a lot of people think that's where the mission of the church has become, is we go and we save people, and then, well, after that, well, I guess you just, don't do anything bad after that. Ever, yeah. And then that's it. I mean, once you get saved, just hang out at Cracker Barrel and drink lemonade until the rapture. And yeah, that's it. and it's,
That sounds good to me.
The church as a whole has got a sense of mission to the world after that. It's all just, we're getting numbers. We're recruiting numbers. And after we recruit the numbers, we're done. And once you're recruited, just don't screw it up, and you'll be okay. And so, I mean, I think about it for myself, defining what the mission of the church is. I mean, when I'm filling a pulpit at a Presbyterian church right now, and I'm trying to infuse that into everything, but I ask myself, have we forgotten a sense of mission? A sense of what it means to be Christendom. So, I mean, what do you think?
Well, if you go to church, this is from a distinctly Lutheran perspective. The actual church event exists for the Christian. It's to feed and nourish the Christian and then send him forgiven back into the world. So that is something that's largely ignored if you think of the mission of the church is the conversion experience at the end. Because what you actually need to do is to feed and nourish that Christian throughout his entire life until he dies. Which is a long succession of tedious, boring moments that are critically important to someone's spiritual life. But it doesn't sound exciting.
You are using the word church the way I would describe what worship is.
Yeah, so that's
Church is people. Worship is activity.
Yeah, the church service. The church service is, I think, something that's forgotten when people talk about it. This is how we actually feed Christians. This is how we give them the actual strength to be in the world and not of the world. It's actually that church service.
Well, but it sounds like then again the mission of the church is just to be in the world and not of the world.
Well, we have to be the salt and light. We do have to convert. We do have to be evangelists.
Absolutely.
But like you're saying, every Christian book, like everybody gets saved at the end. That's not either true, or and it seems to leave out that you have to feed and nourish the Christians.
Yeah.
That's something that seems to be constantly forgotten.
But is that the full mission of the
Once
church?
you're in the church, you have to feed and nourish the Christians in the church. I think it's at least half of it.
Yeah.
If you don't feed and nourish the Christians, who's going to be converting the non-Christians?
Right. Yeah.
I think that's one
The
thing.
DVDs.
That's one thing the movies like the Kendrick brothers do that is of benefit because it does provide that refuge and that safe place for a family to sit down and watch a movie and not have to worry about anything off the charts bad happening during that 97 to 126 minutes, because it does that feeding and nourishment. But when you do nothing but feed and nourish the church, then you've excluded all of the outside. I participate in a program that feeds the homeless every other week, and when we do the roster for the year, it's tough sometimes to find 26 different groups to come in and feed the homeless. It's about 150 people, and your budget's pretty good to do it. You need 20 to 30 volunteers. And I've been doing it now for one thing we don't do, most of the other people that are long-term sponsors is, we do not do anything except we gather the staff in the kitchen and pray, and our guests can see it. But then we go out and we're servants to them. We walk the walk with Crystal. And our goal is to make sure that they have good, tasty meals, that they're loved during the time they're there, and we get some clothing and stuff for them. And they walk out and they're happy. And they think, maybe all Christians aren't going to shut down my store so I can get a room to shelter for the night. Or I needed a new pair of jeans last week when I went to that place. I could sit and read some Bible tracts with them or whatever. Because there still are organizations like that out there in big cities especially. We don't. We're just like, hey, you like bacon cheeseburgers? Because we're serving bacon cheeseburgers. Come on by. And it's pretty cool because they walk out of there with maybe that little bit extra what Christianity is going to do for them. The Christians who are there serving, they get fed and nourished through as well what we're doing. And I think in our writing, we can do that too. We don't have, as a brilliant man once told me, Joe, put away the Jesus stick, you're beating them over the head. So we don't have to absolutely bash them and throw scripture and books and everything else. If we just write great stories about people who are Christians and have their own flawed, difficult lives and move through life trying to follow Jesus, no matter what lumps in the road they reach, I think we provide a great interest. People can read that and go, that guy was kind of a hot mess, but he pulled it out at the end, sort of. Kind of wonder what happens next. Maybe you can bring people closer.
What happens beyond evangelism? Sorry.
I have a grandson. And what we found, he's also running. He got published with
he mentioned, what's the purpose of the church? I think if we step back and ask maybe an even deeper but connected question, what is God's purpose? In Genesis 1, we were created in God's image. We all know that because man sinned, the image of God being shown is broken until accepting Christ. That allows us then in John 13, where Jesus says, you haven't seen God, but you've seen me. And the same is true with us as believers. Unbelievers can't see the face of the Father, but they can see the face of Jesus in us, which is going to be shown in whether it's loving acts like the food pantry or whether it's different. Our job as Christians is to show people God because they can't see Him, and also tell them what God has to say because they're probably not going to pick up a Bible. So I think in regards to the purpose of the church specifically is we're to have a relationship with God, which causes us to look like God, which then attracts people to God. I think is the best purpose of the church. And then we stumble along the way consistently, and as you mentioned, we have to be fed to know how to do that. And a lot of Christians, from my perspective as a pastor, we do a good job feeding them at church, but not teaching them how, I think you were sharing, to go out. We have spiritual constipation. Here's a bunch of food, but we do nothing with it.
Right.
Where I was going is you had just mentioned the guy who wrote conversion stories at home, and I think a great example is it's a great example. But Bobby's a Christian the whole way through. But I can remember at least one occasion where he specifically goes and talks to the priest. Right, it's the priest.
Right.
He specifically goes because he needs spiritual guidance. He's a Christian that gets fed and assisted throughout his Christian life. It's not a conversion story for Bob, right? And I think that's a critical kind of character if you're going to have both Christians and non-Christians read it. Because the Christian has been in the church his whole life. The conversion experience is not, that's not what we live for. I was baptized in the church. I've been in the church since I was infant.
Right.
And that my life can be more like Bobby's life as a spiritual life. There will be times when I have troubles and I need to go and seek counsel and seek advice. And you can see how that acts out. And I think that can be really helpful, especially for like the men that don't go to church. You can see that it's actually meaningful to go seek spiritual guidance and seek spiritual food, to actually seek it out. As a Christian, you don't have to be a non-Christian to go seek Christ. The Christian also needs to go see Christ.
Yeah, I think that's what would get, that's what getting at is, if it's either, in some circles, either you're being evangelized to or you're evangelizing, and that's it. There's no other function of the Christian life other than to be preached to or to preach to others. And whatever, even like showing love to other people. You're all just with that one goal of just getting people in. What's the Christian life outside of that? Beyond conversion, beyond evangelism. What is the goal? What is the goal for the church and for those people? If the whole world was Christian, what would we do now? A lot of them would. I thought there's been some evangelists where they've always been disappointed that I was already a believer. And you can actually see disappointment. Are you sure? I mean, what church are you part of? Do you have a really good doctrine? I mean, almost like they were like, and some would lose interest in you.
That's the way I feel when I talk to Calvinists. They really don't think I'm a real Christian. You don't have a choice what you're going to say anyways.
Let's not open that can of worms.
The things that attract me are authentic Christianity. I mean, I'm hearing things like, well, the priest knows or the pastor knows or like they got it all down. I mean, where's the reality of life? I mean, in the reality of my life, I went to the pastor, sought help, found out that he was worse than I was later on. Same thing with psychologists, people with doctorate degrees. I ended up, I'm a recovering addict. 5 years, 10 years down the road, I found out those people that I was trying to get counseling from were having the same battle that I was having. Why don't we tell that as writers, tell the truth? Right. Christians battle too.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do it in secret because we're so full of shame that we don't want to tell you. Or we think that no one else has this but me, so we keep it
Just
quiet.
because somebody is also battling something doesn't mean that their advice and counsel can't help. I think that's a logical fallacy. Because
I would disagree.
everybody battles with sin of some kind. Now,
True.
like C.S. Lewis talks about how he won't criticize specifically a gambler for having trouble with gambling because he doesn't feel that temptation. Right? But everybody has particular sins that bother them. Particularly. And that means if you really take it to the logical conclusion, you can't take advice from anybody because they have a sin that is deep and difficult for them, just like you do. So you can't take their advice.
Correct. But
So,
it's a
even if
fallacy
their
of someone
their
outside
sin
the
is
church.
similar to yours, doesn't mean that they can't help you and can't give you advice.
That they can give you advice, but they may not be able to help you. And that's what I'm trying to say is the outside world looks at sometimes the churches with this, we've presented ourselves as this perfect level, and we're not.
And it shows in movies too.
And it shows in the
And that's the propaganda of that.
Yeah.
And authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
You may have to just be loud.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here just for a second because really I think there's room for all kinds of Christian literature, just all kinds. So, like if you ever read Andrew Clayton, you want to know about a man as he really is and how flawed they are and who you can turn to and who you can't. By all means, immerse yourself in Andrew
Empire
Clayton.
of Lies.
Yeah, I mean seriously, because like Werewolf Cop, that poor guy is tortured
Isn't it?
by the whole thing. He doesn't know the
Werewolf Cop is a great book.
It'd make a
It's
good
even
movie.
better than it sounds.
If you're a person who needs a gentle read and you want to take your family to a cute little movie where everything turns out all right, go see Prior Proof and watch the guys all be bright and shiny and just totally change because they've given their lives to the Lord. I mean, this is fine because there's room for a lot in the church because everybody has different needs. And our goal as writers, I think, is to find what your vocation and your voice is and go out there and speak it. And speak it as true as you can. Because truth matters to Christians.
What it isn't room for is falsehood and propaganda.
Falsehood and propaganda.
Right.
Exactly.
But there's a market for it.
There is a
market
market.
for it.
Yeah. Good point.
I'm glad you said that because I mean it reminded me of one of the sermons that impacted me most, and I was in a church trying to find my place because I don't think I belonged anywhere, and a guy was saying, you know what, if you're in a church and you're like, well, there's no one here like me, he's like, awesome. we want you then. Because if you were like these other people, I mean, we don't need another Joe. We already got a Joe. You know, don't need another
My
one.
church says that all the time.
You know, I mean, did Jamie come in with this door here like, well, great, we've already got these others. We don't have a Jamie yet. We need one of those. You know, I mean, so yeah, I mean,
Except for I have to clarify because I think there's room for everything, but a really schmaltzy romance novel. I hate romance. So we were thinking about submitting one to the
Romance
conference.
God's way.
It's gonna have to be really good.
Bottom of the shelf.
So Robert, maybe you started this part of the discussion, which really got everyone excited, on what is the mission of the church. Now let me ask a corollary question to that. As writers who follow Christ, is our mission in alignment with the church? Is it parallel with the church, or maybe is it perpendicular with the church?
well, I think it should be an outgrowth of the church. I mean, it should be something that merges out of the church.
So,
within the church.
that sounds more
I'm not talking about a church. I'm talking about the church.
Right,
Capital C
yeah,
church.
I'm using the as universal.
Okay.
all
The
right.
branch kind of comes out to the side, so it's.
But Jamie, all the interior angles still add up to the same number no matter what.
That's not the discussion we're having.
The hypotenuse.
I don't think we got to the
So
last.
you're talking
so
about
we
like a
only have
parachute
two lines.
or
We
something.
haven't gotten to the third
But
one.
just in terms of when I begin, I love church. I love my church. I love pastoring. But when I begin to write, I don't think about writing as I've got to make this fall in line with what my church's mission is. I want to write a really good piece of art.
Yeah.
And then at the end, maybe edit, reflect some solid theology that hopefully will mess somebody up.
You know, I think for you as someone who believes as strongly as you do, you might not be writing to fall in line with what your church believes, but you will be falling in line with what the church believes.
But I think who you are is going to come out when
It
you're
is,
writing good.
absolutely. It's going to serve the church because you are a member of
I
the
know,
church.
but it may not be like intentionally lined up.
It's not
I
intentional
agree,
because
because
it's
we-
all subconscious. It will.
There's nothing wrong with the visual.
We just got off Calvinism, not just.
Kind of like.
We didn't go there.
Slam for end of the church.
Well, it's part of the same thing, but it's not at odds with it. It's doing
The
something.
mission of the church would be something big like restoring harmony to creation. The mission of restoring all harmony to creation. The way, I mean, harmony between God and man, between man, between man and nature. Something that's got, I mean, we're just so far away from them, but I mean, in your literature, you're doing that by transforming people's souls. You know, you're restoring that harmony.
I think maybe too, in a grander scheme of things, you're taking, and we've said this in different ways, but you're taking the gospel and you're putting it into terms that somebody who doesn't believe can understand. And can see. It's a visual.
Expressing it in a way that no one has
It is,
ever
and that's where the
expressed.
art comes in. I agree with you. It does need to be good art. It does need to be quality. And like somebody else said, it has to be believable. In other words, if they, there are a lot of movies and stories out that you read, and you're like, that's a great, feel-good story. But people look at it who don't believe, and they're like, I can't identify with that. My life looks nothing like that. I've made all these mistakes and stuff. And Joe and I were actually talking about this at supper the other night. You know, if you look at Hebrews 11, the Hall of Faith, and look especially at the last sentence where he just kind of throws them in, and I don't have enough time to mention Samson and Gideon and Jephthah. Well, Gideon, was as timid as they could be. He also ended up his life making idols out of the gold that he had taken. Samson, he said, as he was putting... Yeah, you really struggle to find that spark in Samson. And Jephthah, you remember what he did in Judges? Sacrifices his daughter because he made a very foolish thing. He says, "Can you help me with this?" Now, God didn't want him to die. God never ordained that. But, you look at these guys' lives and you're like, huh. But again, it's the whole of faith, not the whole of great deeds, because those don't save us. And I think the world can look at guys like that and David and all these people and say, hey, these guys aren't that different than I am. We're all messed up, but there is a cure. And I think our art can hopefully help to point them in that direction.
Thank you all.
Now about Calvinism. No.
Why are we talking about Calvin and Hobbes?